So $500 in passive income to the average person may not seem like a lot of money, but to me, it definitely seems and is a lot of money. And I'm going to tell you exactly why. A long time ago, when I was about 19 years old, not 90, I'm sorry, okay, 19 years old, I realized that basically because I was working and I was getting paid hourly, whatever time I spent doing something, that would be equal to money. So whenever I spent money, I was also spending my time. So I remember, for example, one of my goals was I wanted to get myself a $3,000 chain. It was a Cuban. This, by the way, was a gift. I'm not trying to flex on you guys. It was a gift, okay? Now, this $3,000 chain was a lot of money to me back then. And to me, to spend this much money on something like this is still a lot of money, okay? But back then, I was making around $8.75. Now, this basically meant that to spend $3,000 when I'm making $8.75 is the same as spending, for example, 342 hours of work. And when you divide that, for example, by a 40-hour working week, I was spending around 8 weeks of my life and a half just on this stupid gold chain. And I never did it, thankfully, but that switched in my head, and it made me be a lot more conscious of the money I actually spent. So when you think about $500, I don't see it just as $500. I see it, for example, back then to me, that would have been, for example, 57 hours of work, 1 week plus 17 hours. If you're making $20 an hour right now and you're not a broke college student like I used to be, the answer is that is still, for example, well, I'll just do this, make it easier. That is still, for example, 25 hours of work. Don't ignore the calculator because I did it wrong. But $500 divided by, for example, 20 bucks a week, well, 20 bucks an hour is the same as 25 hours of work. That is a general idea. And to me, not having to work that much time is a privilege, and it is awesome. So that's what I'm teaching you guys how to do in this video. So don't think that $500 is not a lot of money. It is a lot of money. And let's get right into the video. As always, guys, like this video on top. Also subscribe and hit the bell to get notified. Now, the very first way is going to be my favorite way, and that's basically investing into the S&P 500. That is a stock market that is the 500 largest companies in the US. And by the way, I hear a lot of people on social media saying, if you're investing into the stock market via 401k or Roth IRA or a normal account, it is so stupid because compound interest, you're gonna have to wait 400 years to make all your money. And then I'm like, what is your option? What is your alternative? And they say, well, you want to basically leverage the heck out of money, use other people's money, buy property, take on a bunch of risks. And by the way, you always hear these people that do all this stuff, but most of their money is made via sales. Sales of actually selling their coursework or just promoting themselves on YouTube, and they just don't get it, okay? But for the average person, this is perfectly fine, okay? So now, the S&P 500, which is the 500 largest companies in the US, and when you invest into it, you basically invest into that, the answer is, has made about a lot more than 8%, more like 11 to 10%, but I like to use lower numbers. So in reality, if you think about it, if you want to get, for example, 500 bucks in passive income per month, well, per year, that's around $6,000. So if you're going to be able to make 8%, well, you divide it by 0.08, which is the equivalent of 8%, and that tells you all you need is about $75,000, okay? So if I were to invest $75,000 in the S&P 500, I could make, for example, around 500 bucks per month, basically on average market returns. Now, does that mean I'm going to get that every single year? The answer is no, because the market fluctuates. Does that mean I recommend you take out 8% every year? The answer is no. That would be very stupid, and here's why. What I would recommend is you use the 4% withdrawal rule, which basically says just take out 4%. This way, if it goes up by 8%, so $75,000 goes up, by example, by 8%, that's the same as, for example, $12,000. No, that's $6,000. So if you do, for example, 4%, you would need the equivalent of about $150,000. So although you have $150,000, right, which is awesome, and you're actually making from that $150,000 every single year on average around 12K, you only take, for example, 6K. That's 4%, or the equivalent of $500, meaning you're leaving $6,000 inside the account to actually grow and grow and compound. The idea is instead of 75K at 8%, you take up, for example, you invest up to 150K to get 4% out, which is the same as, for example, $500 per month. Now, how do you do this, Tommy? Because 75K is a lot of money. 150K is a lot of money. The answer is fairly simple. You want to basically live on half of what you make. So if you basically make 50K a year, you live on $25,000. Well, in 3 years, you'll get to $75,000. That's the idea right there. Is this hard? The answer is it's not that it's hard, because hard would be, for example, something that's very difficult or impossible to do. So it just takes sacrifice to be able to do this, okay? To be able to say, I make 50K, but how do I live on half? Because remember, if you're able to live on half and invest the other half, you're able to make $500 a month in 3 years, passively. 3 more years, that's another 1,000 or whatever, okay? And it compounds and it compounds and it compounds, and that is awesome. Number 2 is going to be real estate. Now, this is not like the average video where I'm telling you, hey, you go out there, you get 10%, 3.5%, you buy a property, you leverage it, you kind of do some fixing to it, you flip it, blah, blah, blah. I'm not telling you to do that. I'm telling you to do 3 things, okay? Either, for example, you pay cash for rental property and try to get 8%, meaning you can actually get a property that costs $75,000. If you're able to get an 8% return in cash, basically, that makes you $500 a month in cash flow. That's awesome. Number 2, say you don't have all that money, but you want to buy a property for yourself. Let's say you buy a duplex. So now you're basically buying a duplex, right? You live in one spot, and then you also live in one spot, but you're still buying based on, for example, hey, I don't want to spend more than 1/3 of my monthly income on a 15-year mortgage, meaning I can afford this, but it's also an extra to have, for example, someone staying here like a duplex or whatever. But then you use their income to pay the mortgage too, your income to pay the mortgage too. You're going to be done in less than 15 years. And once you're done with that, you save money both on your rental both on your cost of living, and you also get money in passive income by doing this. But the con of having a duplex is your tenant lives right next to you, okay? The pro is they live right next to you, but it could be like a problem for other people or so, but I don't really care that much. But it depends on what your priorities are in life or whatever. And lastly, you could always just buy a property, try to pay it off fast, and when you don't have to pay any more mortgage or rent anymore, those are also savings. So saving money on something, saving $1,000 per month, well, that's the equivalent of you now having $1,000 per month extra to do whatever you want. And that's also, in a sense, not passive, but it is money you no longer have to spend, okay? So that's also an option. Now, number 3, and by far it is one of the worst ideas, is basically investing into a high yield savings account. And I wouldn't call this investing, because all you're really doing is parking your money. Nothing wrong with that, by the way. Parking your money is just fine, but the answer is it really wouldn't be considered like an investment in a sense, okay? So the general idea is right now the rates are about 3.5%. I have a friend, he makes around $600 per month, but in reality, he has a lot of money in there. It's not invested, it's just parked there while he figures out exactly what he's going to do next. But you think about it, okay? The whole idea is, this is bad, okay? Because the return is so low and you're being eaten up by inflation, and I don't recommend it, but it's just another option. And I want to give it to you this way I can destroy it and tell you not to do it, okay? But the idea is, if you want to make $6,000 a year, remember, it's the same as $500 per month, and you're only making, for example, 0.035%, which is 35%, for example, the answer is you need to have invested $171,000. Now, inflation right now is upwards to like 7 to 8 to 9% almost, okay? So the answer is all your money is being eaten up. So as you're making some money, yes, you're still losing a ton of value every year, and it's not a good idea because rates are always going to be set in a way where you're also losing money to inflation. So I just don't recommend it unless you can lock in, for example, a crazy bond rate on on a bond, or if you can be locking, for example, some crazy rates on a CD. Like I got a CD, got it for 15% or 12%. And I think in the next 10 years, we're not going to have that problem anymore. I think that's a pretty good thing to do, but they're very unlikely that you're probably going to get a deal like that, if you know what I mean, okay? Now, you have, for example, also number 4, which is peer-to-peer lending. I don't like this. You can do, for example, Lendings Club, you can do Prosper, you can do Upstart. These are just ways to lend people money, individuals, but like in a peer group in a sense, and you're able to make, for example, anywhere from 8 to 20 to even more. But the answer is there is a risk that you could lend your money to someone and they could not pay you back. So it's one of those options that I would ask you to research, but it's not something that I would personally do myself. Now, number 5 is going to be REITs. That is real estate investment trust. This is kind of like a way to invest into real estate via the stock market. And then you have companies that basically use that money to buy a property, the rents that get paid, they pay it out to us, the investors, in a sense. Now, right now, my favorite one is actually VNQ. I used to be a big investor into them, but then I just invest all my money right now into the S&P 500, and I'm trying to buy real property in the real world, not, for example, with the stock market. Not like it's not real property, but like my own property where I'm getting actually cash flow and so on. But it is like more maintenance, more problems, but I am willing to go through that process. But in reality, it's paying right now. If you had invested in 2004, you would have made about 284%. That's the appreciation since 2004. So pretty decent. But on top of that, they pay a dividend rate around 3.5%. So same thing. To get just paid on dividends, you would need about around 171K, but that's not accounted for appreciation and everything else involved, okay? Because you could theoretically put in a lot of money into it, and if it's making, for example, a good percentage every single year, you take out 4% and you're still able to make some more money in a sense and also add up your dividends, okay? But that's just one other way. Real estate investment trust, it is a way to do it. It's not a way that I do it anymore, because for like the stock market, all I do is have 500. And then for my real life, like I say real life because to me, like the stock market is money that grows with the economy, is just there. But then in real life, like actual cash flow, real money that's actually going to come to my pocket because I'm actually going to receive it, because I don't want to take the money out from the stock market, although I could, is actually going to be, for example, investing into some real estate and getting some cash flow that way. That is the idea. And by the way, I don't recommend you say, Tommy, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to just take all 5 and spread my money around. I don't recommend that, okay? I recommend you lock into one, you focus, you double down, and you stick to it, okay? That's kind of what I did. I did the stock market first, and I said, well, I got to $12,000 a year from the stock market. Great stuff. That's what I got to. And now I'm kind of focused, for example, on the real estate market. I'm like, hey, if I can get $12,000 a year from this too, well, now that's 24K, 2 separate places, and my cost of living is pretty down, pretty low. So now I'm able to just kind of be like, okay, stock is good, real estate is good, that's fine. Keep growing them both, even more cushion. But in reality, those 2 are just fine for me. But you want to pick whatever works best for you. And as always, guys, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, hit the bell so you get notified. Up here is another video. Over here is my face. Click on subscribe. And as always, Long Term Team officially out. Peace.